Tonight, Justice League International has two separate crossovers over the span of just one issue. Men of War gives us Frankenstein and a robot versus the Nazis. And I officially decree that the words Green Arrow are to be punishable by death. All that and more this week on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 31 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and this is an episode of endings, of conclusions and finales. Not mine, of course, because I'm stuck in this job for the next 4 years, but yeah, this is going to be the ending of a couple of series. But before I tell you which ones, how about I just tell you everything that's coming out this week. So, this week, April 4th, 2012, we have the number 8 issues of Detective Comics, Batwing, Action Comics, Red Lanterns, Green Arrow, Justice League International, Men of War, O.M.A.C, Stormwatch, Hawk and Dove, Static Shock, Animal Man, and Swamp Thing. Additionally, we have the number 2 issue of the miniseries Night Force, and spoiler alert, I actually understood this one, so already points for that. Anyway, endings. Yes, there are 4 comics ending this week. There are 6 ending over the course of the entire month, so you may as well say it all ends here. However, those comics are O.M.A.C, Static Shock, Hawk and Dove, and Men of War. And I gotta tell you, 3 out of 4 of those I completely understand. I do kind of wish Men of War could have kept going, but I get it. It's not exactly the target demographic sort of book. So that is what we're going to be looking at today, and at the end of the show, I will tell you the books that will be replacing them on this week, because it is just a one-for-one replacement. Got to keep that 52 branding going on. So let's talk about our first comic, Detective Comics number 8. Detective Comics number 8, written by Tony S. Daniel, art also by Tony S. Daniel. Last issue was End of an Arc, and genuinely out of my memory. I cannot remember it at all. So this issue picks up completely detached from that. And it kind of follows after the events of Batman The Dark Knight number 7. And also the backup story that I believe went along with this comics issue number 4, which I would have covered in episode number 26. It's standalone. Just assume it's standalone and accept what I'm telling you here. So we open up, Catwoman's busting out of a building, and Batman's just saying, like, Catwoman, she's a hero, but a thief, and a lover, question mark. But right now she broke into a hazardous materials lab and stole something, so gotta deal with that. And we see it's 10:45 at night, and as she's leaping through the town, she gets caught up by Poison Ivy, who is pretty much out for blood, it seems like, at least in the eyes of Catwoman, because she's like, "Oh, Poison Ivy, you're gonna kill me." And Poison Ivy's like, I'm not Poison Ivy. Whatever you're seeing is a lie. Look at me. And then we see that it's actually Batman who is trying to deal with the fact that Catwoman has been dosed with fear toxin. So he sprays her with the antidote, and then we get all right, let's go back 15 minutes. How'd we get here? And apparently Scarecrow put a burner phone on Gordon's desk, and then Batman was called in to deal with it because Scarecrow has a hostage, and Batman has 1 hour to find Catwoman breaking into the hazardous materials lab, find out who she was going to see and where, and then find that person. If Batman can do all that in an hour, the hostage will live. Or, not in so many words. But regardless, cut back to now. Catwoman's recovering. And we see that she was stealing the anti-fear toxin capsules that Batman gave to the police because of that Batman the Dark Knight story arc, I guess. And Catwoman's like, "No, I wasn't anywhere near Scarecrow. I was just," and then Batman just starts like shaking her and just like, "Where were you? Who are you going to see? I'm running out of time." And he gets the information, but this is my first problem with this particular issue, is that he's not detecting anything. He's just shaking people down and, like, hoping that they have the info just already there. Like, he's not noticing anything. Regardless, she does manage to get the name of her fence, like the person who set her up with this job, and his name is Digger Jones, and he's apparently in a dogfighting ring right now. So Batman busts in and asks everybody, all right, where's Digger? And Digger's gone running, so he pulls out a gun, and he's like, all right, Batman, I got a gun. Don't you try anything. And Batman just busts through a wall and grabs him. And immediately afterwards, we see him tied up and about to be fed to his dogs. And Batman's like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it if you don't give me the answer. And Digger immediately cracks and was just like, okay, all right, I was going to meet these guys with some of my best dogs, and they were going to experiment and stuff like that. And he gives up the street address. But as he does so, Scarecrow calls up, and he's like, oh, you're doing well, Batman, but you still have to find the people that he was going to meet up with. Leave Digger to the dogs and get on with the thing. And then Batman's like, all right, I know you can see me now, so I'm going to just stop you now. And he jumps out the window, immediately finds Scarecrow on a nearby rooftop, and was just like, all right, you better pray that you were kidding about that hostage, because this is not going to end well for you. And he's like, I never told Gordon there was a hostage, which he didn't. Gordon just kind of assumed that. But he said that there was a victim, and that the only way Batman could save this quote-unquote victim is by doing these tasks. And so basically Batman just doesn't want to hear about it, and he starts beating the crap out of Scarecrow. And Scarecrow's like, you idiot, you're gonna ruin everything, ah! And as he's like kicking Scarecrow to the ground and is about to like take him out, Scarecrow pulls out a picture of a young 10-year-old boy, and he's like, oh, you'll find him here. This is where the boy is. He's at that address that Digger gave you. And Batman's like, oh, all right, fine. So he ties Scarecrow up, and he goes on his way to the address that was given to him. And when he gets there, he sees a whole bunch of people dressed up as, like, Scarecrow. So clearly they're putting on some sort of act. But he just goes through and starts knocking them all out because they're just hired goons. He gets in, well, before he even gets inside, we see inside is Eli Strange, who was introduced in that backup story like 4 issues ago. Okay, he's the son of Hugo Strange. I don't like that backup story told me nothing about him. So this is just he's here now, and apparently he wants to get those all the drugs or whatever loaded up. So he gets a call from his dad, Hugo Strange, who's just like, "Oh, shut up, Eli. My sources are saying you got to get out of there." And Eli's like, "What? What am I supposed to do? Just leave the chemicals here?" He's like, "You idiot." And then Batman comes in, knocks out Eli, takes care of all the goons, and he's like, "Where's this boy? Tell me where this boy is." And then he looks at Eli, and he looks at the picture. He's like, "Ah, son of a bitch, you're the boy. Dang it." And then we just get a 1-page recap of, like, everything we're supposed to know about Eli. Of he was super duper smart growing up, and he didn't know who his father was, and he was raised by his mom until she died, and then he was bounced around a couple of different homes. He worked for the Pentagon, and now he's the son of Hugo Strange, I guess. I don't know. Basically, it just ends with one panel of Batman saying, like, "I stopped the chemicals from getting to the city. Crisis averted. Story over." So, yeah. I mean, it's a one and done. It's so weird that they were building off of that. Like, is that all we're doing with Eli? Is that it? Because when I talked about that backup, I think I was like, oh, maybe they're setting something up for the future. And I mean, they might still be, but it seems like he's done. He's just arrested, and he was kind of shit at the things he was doing. So, are we just done with him? Was that it? Was that the whole setup? I don't know. Oh, sorry. No, it was Eli. Yeah, they also call him Elliot, so whatever. Point being, it's fine. It's just a one and done. It's kind of interesting, but at the same point, like, it's just Batman shaking a bunch of people and then coming to the conclusion, like, well after he should have. So, I don't know, I'll give it like a 6. It didn't feel detective-y, and I know Detective Comics doesn't have to feel that way, but that's how it was pitched back in issue 1, and it just feels like it's been getting lesser and lesser over the course of this whole series. So, next issue is a tie-in to the Night of the Owls event that's going to be going on. We'll deal with that as we do, but yeah, no, this was just like a 6. It's perfectly like whatever. It's not harmful, but it's not great either. Batwing number 8, written by Judd, Winick, art by Dustin, Nguyen. We left off last issue with Nightwing and Robin coming across Massacre in a warehouse, and he had seemingly taken over one of the steelback armors from the Kingdom's hero, Steelback. This issue picks up with basically the middle of the fight scene. Nightwing, Robin ducking around, trying to dodge all the bullets and the swords and machetes and whatnot, and Massacre's just like, hey, you're not going to be able to last forever. Either Steelback's going to shoot you or I'm going to slice you. Me and you were on the same side. We're both punishing criminals. Shouldn't we be working together? And Nightwing's like, okay, yeah, but like the punishment thing is kind of where we disagree. Also, I don't have to dodge around forever because we got multiple Batmen incoming. And then comes in Batman and Batwing. So immediately, Robin, Nightwing, and Batman all converge on the Steelback armor because Massacre and Batwing got some personal stuff to take care of. So Batwing just swooshes in, grabs Massacre, and continues through the wall of the warehouse, just taking them outside so that everyone else can focus on the armor. And they're on the phone with the original Steelback, Daniel Balogun, who is telling them, all right, I'll tell you guys where the weaknesses are and how to take this thing out so you can get to whoever's inside, because it's just armor. There is still a person inside. So then we see over with Batwing and Massacre, and they start fighting, and basically Batwing just immediately is like, no, I'm not, this is enough, this is it, we're done, we're not doing this anymore. Whatever you want to do here is not happening. So he fires off like some clamps that get Massacre stuck to the wall, and he's like, I know who you are. I know exactly who you are, and I hate you with everything I am, for everything that you've done. I know that you're General Keita, the warlord, who I thought I had left to the dogs. And Massacre's like, Keita, are you serious? That piece of crap? You think I'm him? No, how dare you lump me in with him? And he just pulls off the grapple and punches Batwing in the face. Cut over to the Steelback fight, and Nightwing's just throwing small explosives to distract the Steelback armor so that Robin can get in underneath and take out the legs. And then meanwhile, Batman gets on top and shoves a batarang into an external shutdown switch, which I guess is the equivalent of putting a paperclip into your phone. And so he shuts down the armor, it opens up, and there is nobody inside. So, as it turns out, it was being piloted remotely. So, as they're doing this, there's a loud, like a robotic noise, I guess you want to call it. It's an explosion. It's a self-destruct timer. That's what it is. And Steelback's like, all right, you guys got to get out of there. It's going to explode. So then we cut back over to Massacre and Batwing, and basically Massacre's like, how dare you lump me in with him? He's like, fine, whatever, you're not him. Regardless, you are still someone exactly like him who does terrible things in the name of quote-unquote order or whatever. There's no more blood on my hands here. And he kicks Massacre hard enough to knock off his little skull mask. And underneath it, he sees just a guy. Like, I don't recognize him, but Batwing very quickly does, because it's his brother. It's Isaac. No points if you got that. It was literally down to two people, and Isaac was the only one left. So apparently Isaac says something like, oh, the Redeemer, he helped show me the truth, everything I needed to know. And Batwing's like, what? Hold on, Isaac, what the hell? And immediately Isaac's like, how do you know my name? What's going on here? And Batwing's like, all right, look, let me help you. I'm not going to hurt you anymore. Just let me help you get out of this. And he's like, I don't know. You know my real name. This is not according to plan. He gets a call from Batman saying that they got to evac because the whole thing's going to explode. So he stretches out his hand to grab for Isaac. And before Isaac takes his hand, he's like, tell me, who are you? And Batwing's like, it's me. I'm Dave. And then explosion. Elsewhere, soon afterwards, phone calls being made by a shadowy man to Massacre saying, hey, I lost contact with you after I self-destructed Steelback remotely. I'm going to the rendezvous point. I hope to see you there. But then Batwing busts in and was just like, we traced your signal. We know it's you. We know you're the guy who's piloting this. We know that you're Redeemer. It was you, Josiah Cone, a.k.a. the tech guy for the Kingdom. Again, no points if you guess that one. And basically they just go through his motivation of like, oh, he did it because they let so many innocent people die or so many children die. They got in bed with that warlord for the sake of quote unquote order. Like, blah, blah, blah. They all deserve to die. And he basically tells him how Isaac was living in the jungle. He was like half crazy, and he's the one who like brought him back to his sanity and gave him focus and purpose. So Isaac didn't die at the hands of the warlord back in the day. So basically Josiah's like, all right, well, fine. You're going to kill me? Then kill me. Go ahead. I will gladly accept it because I will die a noble cause. And Batman comes in. He's like, no one else is going to die. Notably, Batwing doesn't say that, though. Batman says that. So let me get a little epilogue here where Batwing is talking to Batman, and, you know, they've got Josiah Cohen. He's probably going to be extradited to the Congo for his crimes. Massacre, a.k.a. Isaac, disappeared without a trace. They're not sure where he is. And Batwing's like, I'm going to find him, and I'm going to rescue him. Not capture him, rescue him. And they just have a little heart-to-heart talk about, like, how they can come from such terrible, terrible past. Like, he was a child soldier. How could they ever come back and do something that's truly good? And they're like, it's because we came from such troubled past that we are able to do good. And that's where it leaves off, except for 2 pages here, where it just shows a flashback of David and Isaac in the jungle. They're looking out for people. They literally have guns on them. And Isaac is asking David stories about their parents that he can't remember because they died so young. And they're just reminiscing and telling a story about how David had the hiccups and his father was making fun of him for it, and they were laughing together. And David tells Isaac, look, I miss him too, but I will always be here. Always, brother. And that's it. I like it. It's solid. I think that it felt kind of rushed in terms of like, oh, okay, we're just having the reveal, the part where they disappear, the guy who was actually in charge of it all, and all that stuff. All of that was all just in one issue, and it was just wrapped up very quickly. Like, when it said we're going to the States, I thought we had at least another, like, 5 issues of going, like, just dealing with that. But it's like, no, we're done now. We're done. Maybe that has something to do with the fact that the next issue is a tie-in to the Night of the Owls event. Possible? I don't know. Overall, though, I think it's like a 6.5. Again, it is the Dustin Nguyen on art. Wasn't quite as good as the last artist, I believe Ben Oliver. But it does have its own style, and I do like the way it looks a lot of the time. So it's good. But yeah, it just feels really rushed, and I feel like they were like, oh, okay, well, we got to wrap this up before we get into the Night of the Owls thing. So yeah, unfortunately, didn't quite have the breathing room I would have hoped, but still not bad overall. Action Comics number 8, written by Grant Morrison, art by Rags Morales and Brad Walker. This issue is mostly fight scene and then like 7 epilogues. So I'm just gonna move through as fast as I can. Last issue picked up with him picking a fight with Brainiac, and here we are. So we open up with all the shrunken Earthlings in Metropolis looking out at the fight, and Lex Luthor's like, I would rather live out the rest of my life in this bottle than be saved by Superman. And Lois is like, that's stupid. And then we see the fight going on, where it is basically a 3-way fight between Superman, just Metallo, whatever his actual name is, whatever, and Brainiac. And Metallo and Brainiac are like pretty much fused together, like they are speaking for each other here. And throughout the whole fight, every once in a while, like bursts of emotion come out of Brainiac or out of Metallo, and he's like, "Oh, Lois, I did this for you, please." And because of that, Brainiac's like, "Oh, okay, no, I don't like this emotion stuff. Get off of me. Get off. I'm done. I'm done with you. Go away." So eventually, it comes down to a thing of Metallo's able to push through his programming or whatever and be like, oh, I'm a threat. You got to take me out, Superman, so that you can take out Brainiac. And he does. He just punches him out. Meanwhile, the entire time throughout this, Brainiac just keeps on saying like, oh, you cannot possibly mess with my collection. It's so perfect and pure. You're necessary for it. Everything's in mint condition. I put it in bags and blah, blah. It's poking fun at comic collecting. It gets really obvious once he starts talking about mint condition. One interesting thing here is, though, as he's going through his, like, collection and crashing into some stuff, the actual, like, armor he's wearing changes from the blue and red to a gold and green and then a red and white. I don't know why. It's not mentioned or explained or anything like that, but he takes on like a bunch of different symbols as well. I don't know. I'm saying that in case it comes up later. So regardless, the fight continues on, and Brainiac basically makes the thing of like, no, look, your world is doomed and I'm here to save it. And he's like, no, you don't understand. As long as I'm around, the world is safe. Therefore, put the city back. And he's like, well, no, I don't want to. And then Superman threatens to just break everything in his collection. Because he's like, you literally cannot stop me from doing that. I will destroy everything you have. And he's like, no, okay, all right, I guess we can come to something. And as he's got him on the, like, defensive, Superman reaches into the Bottle City Metropolis, pulls out the itty-bitty shrunken rocket that has been calling out to him this whole time. And he's like, I'm willing to bet that much like me and my armor I'm wearing, my ship is also indestructible. And it's also a like sentient crystal computer. And I bet you have no defenses against that. And he flicks it at Brainiac, and it goes inside of his like brain. And immediately crystals start shooting out in every direction. And I guess Brainiac is taken care of. So then Superman collapses, and it's like counting down the seconds until miniaturation is permanent. And he gets into some beam of light, and he's like, get Metropolis back to full size. And then it works. Doesn't really explain how, but it does. And he looks down, and from space, he's on Brainiac's ship, and he looks down, and he just smiles at the Earth. And then epilogues. So everyone reunites with everybody down. There also was a whole thing of Glenn Morgan is literally just like crazy talking, where he's like, I saw God, and there was a tiny man behind the bar, and he's the devil, and I'm in hell, someone let me repent. So he's giving up like all this dirt to reporters because he's just trying to repent because he thinks he's in hell. They question whether or not Steel is going to be a superhero, named Steel. We see Lex just bailing because Superman's a thing now. And then we cut over to Clark and his editor at the Daily Star, who are like, hey, Clark, you did a great job. Glenn Morgan went absolutely batshit crazy, and he confessed to everything. And none of that would have been possible without you. So how about you go join the Daily Planet now? Which I guess is good from Clark's perspective, but from the Daily Star doesn't seem great. And then there's a quick talk of Superman and his landlord, because if you remember back in like issue 3, she found out about his secret, and basically they just say like, yeah, no, I'm not going to tell your secret to anybody, but like, why don't you go out and make some real money or something like that. Then we see the person who was giving hints about Glenn Morgan was actually Lex Luthor talking to Clark Kent under a code name, so that's a thing. And then we get Metallo, who is being held captive by the military under heavy sedation. So there's that. And then, all at once, we flip the page, and I assume Brad Walker's the one who took over art. And it's not bad. It is not bad art, but it does not look anything at all like Rags Morales' art. And it was such a jarring change. So, he's getting the key to the city, and everyone's like, yeah, okay, so here's the deal, guys. I am an alien. Let's all just learn to work together, and I'll always be out there to protect the little guy. Okay, thank you. And then Lois steps forward. It's like, Lois, Superman, do you have a place where you go to be alone? And then we see him think for a second, and then he goes cut to the Smallville graveyard where he's talking to his parents, and he's like, hey, it turns out they like me, and I'm able to use my powers, and I don't have to be scared of whatever they'll think of me or whatever. So yeah, cool, awesome. And then he flies off into the sky, up to the Brainiac ship, where he speaks in Kryptonian the whole time, so I have no idea what he's saying. But as he looks out through like the big dome of glass over Earth, you get this like feeling that he's watching over it. So yeah, there's that. And then final epilogue in New Caledonia, Dinosaur Island. There's a dinosaur charging after a hunter guy who is named Mr. Zarov, and also that tiny little diminutive man who was behind the bar and also was in the beginning of the book, and he's just been around, and I'm sure he's going to come up later. The diminutive man is saying, like, hey, he says you can hunt anything, says you've hunted everything, but can you hunt a bulletproof man? And then Dr. Zarov shoots the dinosaur in the head and says, there's no such thing as bulletproof. And that's where we end. Okay, it's fine. Like, I don't know. It didn't seem like... I don't know what the trajectory there was. Like it was just the fight scene at the end, and then all of a sudden he thought, and he's like, my ship could probably penetrate that thing because it managed to go through space. And then it just did. And then he just said, all right, turn back to normal. And it worked. Like, it kind of just feels like Superman's able to do whatever he wants because he's Superman. And to be fair, if that's the way Grant Morrison's going with it, that's fine. I have no issue with that at all. But it is an interesting take because it just seemed like, so, okay, I guess that's what we're doing now. As for epilogues, dear Lord, do we need to go Return of the King on this? All of them are fine. The only thing, like, I completely forgot that the landlord knew his secret identity. Like 2,000%. So, yeah, there was that. Same thing with him getting calls from Lex Luthor. That 2 issues in the middle of this arc, just to cut to the Legion of Superheroes in the future, totally unnecessary and should have been cut. But we had it and whatever. So, overall, I give this one, like, it's a 7. It's fine. It's good, even. I like it. It's just a matter of, it's a lot. And I can see why people wouldn't like it. So, yeah, 7 for this. The art change was jarring, so that brings it down a little bit. But I like both art styles, so I guess that brings it up. I don't know. Bouncing back and forth, it comes out to a 7. Red Lanterns number 8, written by Peter Milligan, art by Andre Guinaldo and Jorge Jiménez. Last issue we left off with Jack Moore crashing onto Yzmalt as a Red Lantern, distracting Atrocitus as he was being attacked by Abysmus, and Abysmus shoving a giant spike through his chest, seemingly killing him. This issue picks up 2 hours ago with Abysmus just lurching his way across the planet, and he's like, all right, well, I'm going to do it. I'm really going to do it now. And as he struggles to make his way to wherever he's going, he yanks out one of his own ribs and says, I'm going to shove this thing in there, and I'm going to pollute it, and that's going to kill them all. And we see that it is the Red Lantern battery, like the central battery, that he's going to shove his rib in, and apparently that's going to mess everything up. So, yeah. Cut to now, and it's just a fight between... It's literally where we left off. Jack Moore is being attacked by all the Abysmusi, whatever they were called, and Atrocitus is down on the ground, just like out for the count. And Atrocitus sees Jack, and he's like, I'm gonna kill you. And Jack like manages to focus. He's able to talk, and he's like, if you attack me, I'm gonna fight you. And sure, you'll probably win, but I'm gonna do some damage. Are you sure you want that? And Abysmus comes up, and he's like, are you talking like full sentences? That's weird. Anyway, what's your name? And Jack tries to say Ja, and then he just spits out Rancor. So that's his name now, Rancor. So we see this weird like black energy coming out of his Red Lantern ring, and he feels weak and sick. And he's like, well, Abysmus is like, yep, that's it. It's all started. The mighty leader will fall as well. And Abysmus starts making his escape with a bunch of his other guys. And Atrocitus, with the giant spike still in him, is like, oh, don't let him get away. I'm gonna take him, and I'm gonna tear his heart out, and I'm gonna feed it to my cat. And Jack's like, wow, that guy's really angry. So he pulls the spike out of Atrocitus' back, and he's able to talk. And Atrocitus is like, dude, that's weird. You're able to talk? That's okay, cool. You must be new here. But as he's pulling out the spike, a bunch of the other Red Lanterns arrive, and he's like, oh, of course, Atrocitus has been attacked. This must be one of the treacherous Red Lanterns that split off and went with Bleeze. And they think that that's who Rancor is. So it's like, uh-oh, misunderstanding. But Atrocitus just gets up, yanks out his spike, and says, wait, he didn't do it. And then falls back down again because he's like, oh, okay, where's my healing factor? I should be better now. And as they're all just sitting around talking for a second, one of the Red Lanterns collapses with that same sort of black energy coming out of the ring. And we see it spread over their body, and then they just drop dead and like wither away. And Atrocitus comes to the conclusion of like, okay, yeah, we're being attacked, everyone. So as far as I could tell, Zilius, who's one of the Red Lanterns who showed up, accuses it of like Jack being the one who did it, and Jack just knees him in the balls, like it just looks like that, and then punches him in the face. And he's like, oh, it wasn't me, and I'm getting more angry every second. And as he's getting more angry and all the Red Lanterns start like piling on him, he uses that rage to make a construct out of his ring, and it's this giant hulking like blood-looking monster. Cut to Bleez in space, and she's heard news of a new lantern, a human lantern, crashing on Gizmalt, and they're like, oh, so Earth is involved in the Red Lantern stuff? Okay, cool. So, hey, Scalix, go to Earth and find out whoever caused, like, such rage for a human to be able to join us, and then we shall get vengeance for them, or whatever it is the Red Lanterns do. And then cut to Earth, where the guy who caused him to get so enraged, the guy who killed his grandfather, is being interrogated by Guy Gardner, who basically comes up and grabs him with a construct and be like, okay, tell me everything you know about that guy. And he's like, well, his name was Jack Moore, and I totally didn't kill his grandfather. It was self-defense. And Guy's like, right, got it, you're a dick. Anyway, bye. And Guy's like, wait, hold on, what if he comes back? And he's like, bye. And so he just flies away. We cut over to a ship that the Abysmus and his legion has overtaken, and Abysmus is like, have I ever told you how I came to be? And his little guy's like, yes, master, you've told me numerous times. Okay, well, let me tell you again. And then he recounts his origin of like, Atrocitus molded him out of scattered bones and skin of travelers, but there was some fatal flaw in Abysmus that made him useless to Atrocitus' purpose. And so then he was brought back from the dead by someone even more powerful than Atrocitus, who we don't get the name of yet. But when he did so, his terrible flaw had been poisoned out of him. I don't know what any of that means. But then we cut back to Jack, who's wielding his Red Lantern construct to attack the other Red Lanterns who are attacking him. And he's like, oh boy, I don't know how long I can keep this up. The only person who could have saved me was that big ugly guy who had the spike in him. Where did he go to? And then we see Atrocitus making his way over to the Blood Ocean. He's like, right, yep, there was a prophecy about this. Something about a weakened poison lantern and a flawed Red Lantern. And I remember this. And how did it end? Oh, that's right. The Red Lantern has been destroyed. So the central power battery is nearly all but dead, completely like melted looking. And yeah, the Red Lanterns are on their last legs apparently. A lot happened. Big issue. I think the little detour into Bleez and the little detour into Abysmus's origin probably unnecessary, but the rest of it I liked. It all felt pretty natural. I think the Guy stuff, especially since they introduced him, I think 3 issues ago, I think it's been flowing pretty well there. So yeah, no, overall I like the issue. It's fine. Art-wise, it's also great. I think most of it is, I don't know, I think most of it might be Jorge Jiménez, but it's very hard to tell. Regardless, it is very good. You can tell where the differences in art are, though. So yeah, I'm gonna give this one I'll give it a 7. I think it's good. I think it's a fine story. It didn't set up any mysteries, and it just upped the stakes, which is fine. I think it's just, okay, now the power battery's gone. That is the thing we're dealing with right now. Instead of whatever Bleez is doing, instead of Jack Moore's stuff, we're just dealing with, okay, the Red Lanterns are literally all about to stop existing. How are we dealing with that? And I'm good with that. Sounds like a good story. So looking forward to the next issue. Green Arrow number 8 and Nocenti, Harvey Tolibao. I hate this book so much. So last issue we left off with the triplet Skylarks capturing Green Arrow. One of them stormed off angrily, and then they framed his jet crashing so it looks like Oliver Queen is dead. None of that matters. None of it matters. None of it matters because this issue picks up some indeterminate amount of time later where he's running through some like Arctic wasteland that's like all black and it has like cyber wolves chasing after him and there's just no explanation and he doesn't have any arrows for whatever reason, so he kicks them. And then we see the Skylark who got pissy earlier being attacked by who she calls Daddy, so I guess it's her father, saying, "How dare you help Green Arrow escape? Other daughters, attack your sister." And then they look on the screen and see him being attacked by wolves. And then they just let her run out after him. And then, as Green Arrow is fighting off the wolves and is like, "I'm not going to kill you because I'm honorable," we get this little dwarf guy. And I'm not saying dwarf is in like short. He is short, but he looks like just like a J.R.R. Tolkien dwarf. So he speaks with a very heavy accent of I don't even know what, but it makes it impossible to decipher anything he's saying. All that gold rutting and gas fracking and fungus and tar sand and drilling killing the planet Yar. That's a speech bubble. What does it mean? I don't know. Regardless, the last Skylark comes up on a sleigh pulled by cybernetic reindeer, and they kiss and they say, "Okay, we gotta go." And this guy's not coming with. So here we go. And we're going to go meet Daddy because he was impressed with how you fought or something like that. And Green Arrow's like, "I don't trust you." And she's like, "Well, you're going to freeze out here." And he's like, "Good point. Let's go." So they make their way back to the big, bulky, and he's just like all white hair, and he's huge, and he looks like a Neanderthal. But they're talking on the way, and they're just flirting constantly. And then finally he gets back and he talks to the guy. He's like, "Oh, here's your arrows back. Sorry, I needed you to prove your worth. I'm impressed at you. Sleep here tonight, and then we will talk in the morning." So then apparently Skylark and Ollie bone again. And then just some indeterminate amount of time later, he's waking her up in Green Arrow gear, and they go and check out this lab that Lear is the name of Daddy, if I haven't said that already. And Lear does all of these animal testing, and apparently his whole thing is that there's a dead zone building outside, and that's what all that black ice area was, and like nothing can live there. So he's genetically modifying some creatures so that they can live there. But of course that's messing with the natural order or something. So Green Arrow doesn't like it. And then the dwarf guy is there. Meanwhile, cut to Q Corps, and apparently it's a whole big thing that stretches over like 2 or 3 pages here of, "Oh, Oliver, we're calling off the search, so he's dead, so therefore Emerson takes control of the company. But if he does something to harm Oliver while he's still alive, Emerson will give up his claim to the Q Corps. So if Oliver is really still alive, then we should just let Emerson do his thing because it'll cause Ollie harm." And So anyway, then there's a giant polar bear, cybernetic polar bear, and then Lear doesn't like the Green Arrow was busting into his lab late at night, so he unleashes the polar bear on him. And then the polar bear literally just like trips over his feet, and then like that's it. And then at the very end here, we see that somehow with the fight here is that Skylark's hair is being grabbed by her father, and Green Arrow is still facing against this polar bear. Next page, they're getting away. They are leaving. And the Skylarks are like, "Oh, Daddy, why did you just let them go?" And he's like, "I know what I'm doing. Stop asking questions." And that's it. And at the very end, apparently some crows are circling a rock, and that Green Arrow thinks that's worth having a look. I hate this book so much. Like, what I just said for the past 5 minutes was nonsense. And I was taking out all of the useless bits here. None of that made any goddamn sense. Like, it wasn't even just like the last issue was just over the top of like, oh, look at him getting flirty with triplets just over and over and over and over again. Fine, whatever. But this didn't even have a plot. This was just a collection of panels that I feel like every time I flipped the page, I missed an entire issue. And art-wise, again, I think I said last issue, Harvey Tolibao, he puts a lot of detail into his arts. But for me personally, it's too much. There is too many just like little lines and tiny little things. It's just too detailed in all the wrong spots. You know? It's like every panel has to have 1,000 lines in it, even if you could get the panel to show exactly what you needed in 200. Like, it's just way too much. So, for a rating, I'm giving this a 1. Just a flat, straight 1. Because, genuinely, I cannot find anything that I like about this issue. There is not a single solitary thing in here. And the only reason I'm not giving it just a straight 0 is because I can see how people could like the art sometimes. That's not even like all, because there's some stuff in here that's just indefensible. But like the writing is absolutely one of them. So yeah, 1. And she does the whole trade. We're on issue 2 of this trade, and she does the whole thing. And I just, oh, God help me. Justice League International number 8, written by Dan Jurgens, art by Aaron Lopresti. We left off last issue with the team being disbanded, and the Booster went up to the roof and was attacked by the guy who caused the explosion at the UN, and then Batwing shows up. So, yeah, this issue picks up 3 minutes ago with Batwing sitting in the hospital room with Vixen saying, "Hey, Vixen, we are such close friends. We knew each other for many, many years. I know that hasn't been established, but trust me, that's how it was. And I'm here due to things going on in my own book, but I'm here for you now, and I will protect you." And then they hear a boom on the ceiling, and he puts on his Batwing gear and goes up to help. And then we cut to now, and basically, it's just a fight between him and, what was his name? Lightweaver? And Lightweaver's like, okay, don't know who you are, and that's not part of the plan, so I'm going to make a tactical retreat, but while I do, I'm going to slash you a few times with my light projections. And Booster jumps in to try to help him out a little bit. And in doing so, he's losing a lot of energy, like he's barely on his feet right now. And he's holding off the light thing, but it drains all of his energy. And then he just, as he's like collapsed over the edge of like the balcony, Lightweaver flies away and he's like, "Oh, and as a parting gift," and he blasts Nightwing, which knocks him unconscious, and he starts plummeting off the building. So then Booster has to jump down after him, and he like catches him and lands on a car. So it's just a nice little heroic scene. Then we cut to across town. A guy's being escorted by police in an armored truck, and his name is Roland Norcutt, and he looks pretty evil. He's got like the Morpheus like circle glasses on, and basically he's an anarchist, like super duper anarchist. Any sort of government structure or police or even corporations, he wants to tear them all down, and he's willing to do whatever he has to do that. Meanwhile, all the guards who he's talking to in this armored truck are literally dying right in front of him as he's talking, because apparently he has the ability to reduce things down into their base form. So yeah, that's the thing. The truck crashes because, of course, everyone's dead. He steps out unharmed, and his name is Breakdown. So as he gets out of the truck, Lightweaver and a woman named Intersec pop up, and they're like, "Hey, Breakdown, didn't think you were going to pull that trigger. It took you long enough." And he's like, "Yeah, okay, what's the deal?" And he explains the situation with Batwing, and then Breakdown asks Intersec, because Intersec's ability is to apparently just put in disinformation, just like control the radio waves, but specifically to spread lies or something like that. Regardless, they talk about some wild card who they maneuvered into position. So whatever that is. So then we cut back to Booster and Batwing. Batman comes in as well, and Booster's like, "I don't like the bold and brash type. They rush into danger." we need to think out of a plan first. And Batman's like, well, I vouch for him. And he's like, okay, I guess he's fine then. Still don't like him. So anyway, they do some data thing on Booster's stuff, and they see Roland, and they're like, hey, so that was the guy who's actually been behind like everything, like all of the UN bombings that we stopped, and like setting fire to the Hall of Justice and all that, like all that stuff is this guy, Roland Norcutt, and he just escaped after killing those police officers, so we got to go find him, and he's probably a metahuman. And so Booster's like, okay, well, there's probably a bigger goal out there than just a little bit of light anarchy, so let's go ahead and figure out what we're doing here. We got to go find this guy, regardless of if we're members of a Justice League or not. So I'm cut inside the hospital, where basically everyone's coming to the conclusion that as long as the heroes are there, bad guys are going to keep targeting it, so they need to get at least all the conscious heroes to leave. Guy Gardner is sitting there next to Ice, saying like, hey, baby, I'm here for you. I'd take the pain if I could. And he's like, yeah, I know, Guy. Thank you. So, yeah, they're being chewed out by some director of the hospital. And as they're like, look, we're going to stay here because we're heroes and we can protect you. And then the chairwoman from the UN shows up and is just like, yeah, well, you're not actually anymore, because if you do any more super heroics, not only are you not part of the UN team, but I will use the full power of the UN press kit to slander your names and bury you in bad press. Mwahaha. So yeah, they have to stop heroing or whatever, and they sit there and try to figure out what they're gonna do. And they're like, look, maybe we are kind of magnets for like bad guys coming to attack. Maybe we should leave and let our friends recover in peace. Maybe we should also go help Booster, because he probably just like is going to do something about this now. Maybe we should go deal with whatever. But as they're about to do that, O.M.A.C shows up. Go check out O.M.A.C. Issue number 8 released the same week as this, and he just shows up and he's like, I am O.M.A.C. And everyone's just like, okay, so you're a big guy who's destroying. I'm sure you also attacked the UN in some way. And O.M.A.C's like, no, I just want a doctor. And meanwhile, he's still throwing stuff and like attacking people. And once the 3 Leaguers are all down on the ground, he's like, if you move, you will die. And that's where we leave off. O.M.A.C crossover. Except it's not a crossover, because issue number 8 that came out this week was actually the final issue. So I think this is meant to take place after that. Hard to tell. So yeah, this was fine. It was good. Sets up a few things. Sets up the new characters of Intersect and Breakdown, which I am going to forget. Overall, it's just more or less an average issue. It doesn't feel anything too magnificent. I do like the page of Breakdown's like manifesto of him just going through it, because it's one of those things where nothing he's saying sounds particularly like bad. It sounds like, it's one of those villains who has like good morals or whatever, but at the same time he's killing people at the exact same time. So it's like, oh, okay, so he's a bad guy, but maybe not like a bad guy. I don't know. So yeah, it's like a 6.5. It's good. It's fine. It just feels like it's still a little bit scattershot on like what it wants to do. And I am really sick of the chairwoman coming in being like, you guys can't be superheroes anymore because you're not going to work for me. So stop. This plot is done. Everyone's made their decision. Just stop with that plot now. So yeah, 6.5 for this. Definitely looking to see how the O.M.A.C thing works out, because he is on the cover of the trade. So he's around for a while at least. Men of War number 8, written by Jeff Lemire and Matt Kindt, art by Tom Derenick. We are pretty much in the end of the series. This is the final issue, and as such, it doesn't really connect to the previous two. So this is a story about Frankenstein and G.I. Robot. So we open up on a man who's doing some like robotics work inside of a Japanese military prison, and apparently he let some guy out named Lieutenant Shreve, who's going to send some information to the Allies. So This is World War II, by the way, in case it wasn't clear. But regardless, he makes his way to Russia, sends some information, and we don't know what that is yet. Meanwhile, over in London, 1941, the Germans had been bombing for, I believe it says 76 days. And as such, they launch Operation Green Man, which is basically, let's send Frankenstein up in a plane and he'll just start killing everybody. And that happens for like 4 pages here. And his little plane has a picture of his wife painted on the side, Bride of Frankenstein. But anyway, he shoots down a few people, but he's like, psh, I do better without a gun. So he jumps out of his plane, having a collide with someone else, and then just starts going after pilots with his sword. And like, yeah, no, he's all in on this. But finally he parachutes to the ground, and we see that Father Time, in his previous body, because currently it is a young woman that he is, or she is looking like, now it's just an old man who you would stereotypically think of as Father Time, is talking to Winston Churchill saying like, see, isn't he great out on the field? So Frankenstein comes in and shakes Winston Churchill's hand and be like, I am proud to serve you and your countrymen, Mr. Prime Minister. But then more info comes in, and they say like, all right, Frankenstein, we got a job for you. You're going to have to head east and head to Japan. Meanwhile, part 2, Bride of Frankenstein is doing like a sexy dance thing at a club at a Japanese bar. And as such, she is acting as a spy, getting some information from some Japanese military higher-ups, and they're giving out military secrets because I guess they don't think she's a threat, what with the green skin and 4 arms and all. But regardless, she gets some information about an attack planned on New York soon. And then she gets a telegram saying that she needs an emergency extraction. So basically we just get a scene of her going through an entire military base, just knocking heads, shooting people, breaking in. And we see that her job was to break in to the cell of that guy from the first page who was building the thing out of machinery. And as soon as she gets in, he's like, it's too late, I let the thing out. And she's like, oh, okay, so we're all doomed then. The Allies has lost. And he's like, maybe not, because the thing that the Japanese were having me build was a killer attack robot that would work for the Axis forces. However, I changed it to work for the Allied forces. So that's a thing. Then we cut to a boat in the North Pacific Ocean that Frankenstein and Father Time are on. And they look through the periscope and they see this robot just swimming at like Mach speeds to them. So Frankenstein's plan to intersect it is to be shot out of the torpedo hull at it. And then they start fighting each other for a few pages. We also see that the Bride of Frankenstein and the dude from the first page, which I don't think ever actually has a name, but the dude from the first page, I'll just call him the scientist, they're seeing this fight and they're like, my husband will never be taken down by such a machine. And he's like, oh, well, we shouldn't be fighting anyway. Regardless, let me just push this button. So he pushes a button, which then allows the robot to talk underwater. And then it pops off the little Japanese flag on its forehead, and it replaces it with a star. And he's like, oh, my apologies, Mr. Frankenstein. I am working with the Allied forces. So my name is Jake, a.k.a. the Japanese Attack Killer Elite. But now I am the Joint Allied Killer Elite. So let's go talk to your boss. So they go talk to Father Time, and he's like, why should I trust this thing? And Frankenstein's like, I don't know, I trust him. And so in order to prove his trust, he tells him how there is a big attack being planned on New York and how they can possibly stop it if they act now, but it might be too late. And then we see what's going on in Chapter 4 with a Japanese man. He walks over to the edge of a pier, throws a briefcase in the water, and out pops freaking Cloverfield. Like it's this giant kaiju-sized like termite that comes out of the water and just starts attacking everybody. And so Frankenstein and Jake fly in, and they're like, all right, I'm just going to jump down and punch it in the face, and let's try to lure it away from the city. So Jake jumps down, punches it in the face, and then he's just dangling on a string as Frankenstein flies away. The monster takes it as the bait and like swallows Jake, which the whole plan was to take it out of the city, and apparently, despite the fact it was made in water, it doesn't have gills, so therefore it starts drowning out at sea. But Frankenstein's like, I'm not letting you die, Jake. So he jumps off of his plane, jumps down to the monster, goes into its jaw, and then slashes his way out, saving Jake from an untimely death. And then we see that, okay, these guys, they're like a team. And despite the fact that you wouldn't expect it, they were a great team and they served in many wars defending freedom for many decades. And then we get a cut to Korea, 1951, where Jake and Frankenstein are both in camo gear. And they're like, you know what? I really like you, Jake. And Jake's like, I really like you too, Frankenstein. And then we see the pile of Korean soldiers' bodies that they are currently sitting upon. The end. What in the hell was that? I love it. It was like just so off the wall. I could definitely feel Jeff Lemire like influence because he's writing Frankenstein as well. I also felt him getting in here. It was good. It was a solid, just nice little like, oh, okay, that's just fun. It's just a fun little story. I guess my only complaint is that it just kind of feels rushed in a lot of ways, which, I mean, clearly it was. It had to establish all this stuff in just one issue, and it was telling a big story. But at the same point, like, I don't know. I guess what it really comes down to is I wanted more from this concept. And I feel like if this is all I get, I'm a little bit disappointed out of it. But I would have liked to see, like, in every major war since World War II, these guys just showing up and doing things behind the scenes. Like, that would have been fun. So, no, overall, I'm going to give this one a 7. I think it's good. I do think there is a little bit holding it back, primarily the fact of it just feels so rushed. But, no, it's a fine story, and I appreciate, after such a serious war story in this entire book up till now, I appreciate how they can take this last issue and just have fun with it, you know? Just have a little bit of fun. So, Men of War, last issue. I did enjoy it. It was a very good book overall. Maybe not for everybody, but I do think that it did a good job of telling a story through action rather than narration. And I think it was very good at that over the main story. So definitely check it out if you get the chance. O.M.A.C. number 8, written by Dan DiDio, art by Keith Giffen. Keith Giffen also helped writing. This is the last issue. It is the final issue, and this is actually the first issue that I didn't really mind. It was okay the whole way through. So, extended section of this. By the way, last issue was a complete throwaway story about talking animals in a zoo because Jack Kirby. But, yeah, most all of this issue is just an extended fight scene of O.M.A.C. breaking into, or already having broken into Checkmate and just destroying everything. However, the narration device is what gets me, because it's just Kevin talking about, like, he's like, oh, this is my last will and testament, and he's just talking about his life, aka giving him character development, which is something we haven't had in 7 issues of this series. Like, finally, we find out what happened to his parents. Like, he was a refugee from, like, a war-torn country, and his parents were killed, and he was tossed around foster homes, and it says how he was a loner, and he has, like, OCD and stuff, and, like, this is all really good stuff. And they just saved it for the final issue? Like, this is the problem, is I didn't relate to these characters at all, because it just felt like they were going from place to place going, yes, destroy that thing, Kevin. Rawr. Now I finally have something to latch onto, and the series is ending. So, regardless, he goes through, and we just see some familiar faces from the past. Like the special ops team are attacking him with the light weapons, and Makari launches this giant stone monster thing, which is apparently their last, like, defense against O.M.A.C, and of course he destroys it. So yeah, they make a good attack, but ultimately O.M.A.C manages to destroy most of the place, and then Brother Eye teleports him out and teleports him back to his girlfriend's apartment, I think. And again, the narration continues on, saying things about, like, oh, I was content with being alone for my life. I just understood that's how it had to be. And then I met her, and she loved me for who I was. And I was like, again, I didn't get any of this in any previous part of this book. Why didn't that show that? So anyway, he just kind of, like, appears practically in front of her. And she's like, okay, you need to tell me what's going on. And Kevin's like, yeah, no, totally. No more secrets. Here it is. But before he can, Checkmate busts into the house because I guess they figured that he would be there. And Kevin's like, all right, here's what's going on. And he O.M.A.C activates, turns into O.M.A.C. And then we see Brother Eye. It turns out this entire time he was battling with Maxwell Lord. Maxwell was trying to upload, like, bombs. He was trying to, like, send bombs up there to where Brother Eye is. And turns out that the bombs weren't meant to destroy Brother Eye, as he previously thought. It was actually meant to magnetize the, like, hull of the satellite, therefore causing all the meteorites in the asteroid field he was hiding in to, like, start condensing around him, so crushing him. So Brother Eye's like, oh, all right, you got me. Good move, Maxwell Lord. Guess this is the end for me, but if it is, I'm going to leave behind one gift. And he shoots down a beam at Kevin in his O.M.A.C form, and then we see that Kevin is still, he's Professor Hulking it. He has all of his normal intelligence. He's able to, like, speak and make full sentences now. He can't feel Brother Eye's presence, but he is still in his O.M.A.C form. And it cut over to Maxwell Lord and Checkmate, who are like, should we deal with that? And they're like, nah, he doesn't matter anymore. He doesn't have Brother Eye backing him up. He's just a normal Hulk. So they say they have more important things to attend to. But it's the end of the book, so I doubt it. So then we see, what is it, Janie? I can't even remember her name. The girlfriend comes up and is just like, Kevin, is that you? Oh, God, wait. We can be together. It's okay. I know. And he's like, no, I'm a monster. Stay away from me. And he walks off into the sunset saying, Kevin Coe is dead. I am O.M.A.C. And that's it. That's the end of O.M.A.C. This book was so scattershot in what it wanted to be. I feel like at the basest level, it was a love letter to Jack Kirby and, like, his stuff, where he's just like, yeah, we're just trying to bring back Jack's classics. And that's fine, but it didn't tell its own story at any point. Like, you had the introduction of Kevin getting his powers, and then you had 6 issues of what should have been 1 issue, maybe 2, of him, like, getting used to it and getting into fights. And now on this issue, it's just over. So this didn't really have a story to tell. Art-wise also, not the strongest. Not by any stretch of the imagination. Keith Giffen has his own style, but even then it's imitating a bit of the Jack Kirby flair, and it doesn't look good. I don't know if that's heresy or not, but regardless, overall, this particular issue was the best issue of the series. Except maybe the Frankenstein one, which, you know, here or there. So I'm going to go ahead and give this one like I'm going to give it like a 6. I think it's fine, but it's still not doing anything amazing. It's just, okay, and here's the end. Really, all that 6 comes from is the fact of they finally made me care about the character, which they should have done back in issue 2. But then just decided, nah, we're not gonna. So, whatever. O.M.A.C pops up, I think, in Justice League International after this. So, yeah, at least we're not completely done with the character as a whole. Stormwatch number 8, written by Paul Jenkins, art by Ignacio, Calero. We left off last issue with the gravity miners coming to our dimension and starting to tear apart the world at Chernobyl. And this issue just picks up pretty much right from there. So the engineer, Jack Hawksmoor, and Martian Manhunter are all talking inside the brain of, like, their ship, because why not? And basically they just recount, okay, gravity miners, different dimension here because in Chernobyl they made some graviton or something like that accidentally during the meltdown. Regardless, apparently Martian Manhunter knows this all comes from some ancient Daemonite legend, and way back thousands of years ago, the Daemonites went to go, like, seed their seed across an entire galaxy, and they figured the fastest way to get there was to make that graviton. But when they did, the gravity miners showed up, and then in, I think they said 9 days, they destroyed the planet, and within 90 days, they destroyed a third of the galaxy. So, not cool guys. Also, their name is the Chryszyrr. Chryszyrr, but it just translates to gravity miners, so I'm just going to call them that. So anyway, Martian Manhunter's like, oh, they have no ethics or morality. They're beyond our comprehension. They're truly something beyond us. And so Engineer's like, all right, well, tell us what we can do here. And Martian Manhunter basically says the Damonites repelled them away thousands of years ago, apparently. So maybe this ship, which is a Damonite ship AI, has the info that we need for that. So Engineer says she's going to get to work. Meanwhile, Jack gets on the phone with Midnighter and Jenny Quantum, asking how things are down there, and the answer is not good. They're setting up an invasion point at the middle of the Ukraine, and we get a nice little conversation here between Midnighter and Jenny, basically boiling down to, okay, what are we going to do here? And Jenny sets up this long scientific thing, and then Midnighter's like, all right, cool. As long as we can get Apollo out, it's all good. And Jenny's like, you like him, don't you? And Midnighter's like, he's a good teammate, and we are trusted allies. And he's like, no. You like him. That's fine. Like, there's no problem with that. But me being a super smart 12-year-old girl, I don't think I'm ever going to have that. So enjoy it, I guess. And Midnighter just shrugs it off and then says, all right, well, I don't understand why, with all of this going on, you want to talk about boys, but hey, you do you. So then we cut back to Engineer, who's still messing around with the brain of the ship. And, of course, the ship, being a Damonite who hates all of them, is talking crap to the Engineer, saying, like, even if I had that information, I wouldn't give it to you, because if all life is wiped out, that is within the Damonite code or whatever. And Engineer's like, yeah, no, I get it. You're not going to give me that. But here's the thing. That's not the info I was looking for. Instead, I was probing your brain trying to find the location of all the Damonite homeworlds. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload this and just kind of point the gravity miners in that direction. And the Damonite's just like, son of a bitch. All right, fine. I'll help. So they hold a meeting. They basically say, all right, here's what the plan's going to be. We got to go down in there. Jenny's going to plant some sort of mathematical bomb, which, okay, just my own little aside here, they repeatedly say the Goldbach conjecture, which is just a thing that has to do with prime numbers and has nothing to do with quantum entanglement at all, but for some reason they keep on saying that it's going to be enough to kill these guys. It bothers me, but whatever. It's like the equivalent of like those hacking scenes where it's like, oh, I'm going to jump the firewall and down the mainframe with C. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. And this just, for me personally, it got me. So regardless, Martian Manhunter and Jenny are going to go through the portal, plant this bomb, and get Apollo out. But then Midnighter's like, no. I'm the one who has to go in there because, obviously, it's Apollo. But the reason that he gives is that if this doesn't work, Martian Manhunter is the only one who knows anything about the gravity miners. So he's going to be needed around just in case. So they go in, they fire their portal. Jack has the city of Pripyat do something to, like, distract them. I think they make another graviton or whatever. It's whatever. So they jump in there, and very quickly they see Apollo. They make their way, catch him. Jenny plants the bomb, but it requires them going outside, like, the little safety bubble for a second. So she's like, all right, Midnighter, pull me back in. And Midnighter's like, no, I'm not going to do that. See, here's the thing, Jenny. You have powers that are developing at, like, super, super big speeds here. Like, you have the ability to blink reality out if you get upset. And I don't think that's good. So I'm just going to leave you here. Bye. And he does. And then he gets back to base holding Apollo. And he's like, oh, we need medical attention for him. I'm so sorry. I tried to save Jenny, but the portal closed too quick, and I couldn't get her out. And then Engineer's like, okay, well, she actually showed up here 5 minutes ago. Because they're in a different dimension, everything moves differently, time-wise. So, yeah. So Jenny's sitting there looking pissed off. Engineer and Martian Manhunter have a chat over some tea, basically saying, like, So did we beat them? And March Manor's like, I don't know. Like, time moves differently for them. So yes, we repelled them for right now, but for all we know, they could just show up in our ancient past, and there's nothing we could do about it. So, so then we see Midnighter's looking over after Apollo as he's healing up. Jenny steps up, and she's like, you're right. I could turn you into a cockroach right now if I wanted to. And the only reason I don't is because I'm not that type of person, I guess, is what it basically boils down to. I can make my own decisions. Like, you say I'm not socially adjusted, but that's not your call to make. But I did make a decision about you, and you're not going to like it. And the Midnighter's like, what? What decision? Jenny, what decision did you make? And Jenny's just like, ha, got you. But she doesn't let on to him. I like this. I like this issue a lot. I thought that the Gravity Miners would be a longer arc than just 2 issues, but, I mean, they handled it pretty well. It was just a thing of, okay, this happened, then this happened, and all right, we're done. Or it's just, okay, we repelled the threat. So, yeah, it was fine. It was a fine issue. I think it does, its primary purpose is to set up Jenny and Midnighter a little bit more. Get their, like, what they do on the table. And in that regard, it's fine. Art-wise, it's good. It's I vaguely remember liking earlier issues more. Like, this doesn't have, like, the same details that first arc, but it's still very good for what it is. So, favorite character is Charlie the Ship, though, 100%. So, overall, I'm going to give this one a 7. I think it's very well done in what it does, but it does still, I don't know, it's just a smaller story. It doesn't feel like any sort of epic, like, oh, yes, this is amazing. It's just, Gravity Miners, whatever they are. So, yeah, I am looking forward to the next issue, and we'll see what Stormwatch is up to then. Hawk and Dove number 8, the end of the series, written by Rob Liefeld, art by Rob and Marat Mychaels. Last issue, there was a hunter and something about the Diak, and Hawk had his finger cut off, Dove had her hair cut off, and then they were rescued by some mystery woman named Zira. Just accept that, because this issue just wraps it up nearly immediately. So this is just an extended fight scene issue. They're breaking into the lair of the Diak, which I guess is a name for, like, dragon or something. And Hawk opens up. He's just dive bombing a bunch of ninjas, and he's talking about how much he loves football. Specifically, he loves being able to push through people to clear a path, because that's what he's doing now. And he beats up a whole bunch of ninjas. He gets stabbed in the chest, and his healing factor is the only thing that keeps him alive. And so he keeps on fighting through, despite the fact the pain is so much, blah, blah, blah. But in the end, it turns out he's only a distraction, because down beneath, underneath, like, I guess the top floor down in the basement, Dove and Zira are busting in to take out the hunter and the dude in charge. I think it's just named Diak. So we get a bit of backstory that apparently way, way back in the day, there were actual literal angels, and the Diak consumed the angels. And then Dove makes the leap that, what's that? They eat and kill winged things? Okay, so for some reason Hawk and Dove are reincarnations of ancient angels. And the Diak likes eating birds, because angels are hard to come by nowadays. So they see Hunter and a bunch more ninjas, and they keep on fighting through. And eventually Zira's dealing with the ninjas, and Dove goes over to deal with Hunter, and she's like, you don't have the drop on me this time, so it's an even fight, and I can win. And then she takes his sword so that he isn't able to attack anymore, despite the fact he had like 6 weapons beforehand. But regardless, she's got him at sword point, and then Zira's like, you have to kill him, Dove. It's the only way to make sure he doesn't come after you even after all this is done. And she's like, no, that's not how I do my thing. So then Diak shows up, the dragon guy, and he's basically like, I've cast a dark spell on you. You aren't able to move anymore, Dove. And then Dove starts moving again, because she's just so super strong, I guess. And he's like, now that I have the piece of the hawk and the dove, all I have to do is kill you, and then I will be made the avatar of war and peace. I will be all powerful, blah, blah, blah. And Dove's like, yeah, okay, that's not going to happen. So let us fight. And then Diak turns into an actual dragon man, like straight up Trogdor. And Dove throws the sword at him. He swats it away. They start fighting for a second. She gets the drop on him. And then Hawk picks up the sword and like just throws it through his chest. And they say, all right, we're done. We did it. Congratulations. So then Hunter's nearby, and they're like, you want to go? And he's like, nah, I'm out. I'm good. Bye. And he just steps away. And Zira's like, well, one day he will return, but just remember, you always have sanctuary with me and my people. And then we get Hawk and Dove and their civilian on top of a rooftop, and they're like, you know, we've been through a lot over these past 8 issues. We fought all these things that blah, blah, blah. I think they actually make a list. I don't care to find it. So regardless, they just say, but no matter what, we will always be together as Hawk and Dove. The beginning. The end. So yeah, it was... I do feel that this suffered from they wanted to do a lot longer stuff, but then they made the first arc like 5 issues, and then they just had to do tiny little fill-in stuff when they told they were only going to have 8. So it did take away from that a little bit, but it wasn't the worst way to end the story. Here's the thing. They keep on talking about the war circle and the avatars and how important they are, stuff like that, but they never actually explain why. They never actually show why. Like, throughout all of this, I never got the feeling of why Hawk and Dove are so goddamn important. They're just told that they are, and I didn't get that sense of it. And that's really the biggest issue I have with this, is that they played up all this huge mythology stuff, and then it comes down to like, yeah, but like, what can they do? It's like if I had a prophecy about myself of like, oh, I will be the one to change the world, and I will be the one that did all this, but then like, I'm just a dude reading comics. What do I do? They're no different than Batman, honestly. The only difference is I think Dove can fly. That's it. Beyond that, and Hawk can heal. That's it. I don't get any sense of them being super. So, yeah, that's my one flaw with the series as a whole. As for this issue, it's just a fight scene. It's just a thing of, yeah, we set up this stuff last issue, and then we're just going to fight it out in this issue. It's fine. It's not great. Its art is a little bit iffy at times, especially when they're not in their superhero outfits. Faces are very much not the forte of these artists, but it's whatever. So I'm going to give this one like 5.5, and bon voyage to Hawk and Dove. Static Shock number 8, written by Marc Bernardin, art by Scott McDaniel. We are on the final issue. This is it. And it is pretty much just a recap issue, if not a Static as a whole and his whole story. But we do have a little bit of actual story here. So we pick up on a young girl, probably teens or so, who is hooked into what appears to be a whole bunch of machinery on a subway train. And Static's narrating saying like, oh, she was bullied relentlessly at school. She didn't know whether she wanted to lash out or disappear, and she found a way to do both. And it's apparent that she has some sort of ability that allows her to like merge into this subway train, which is like a mile long, mind you. And she's transformed it into some sort of giant killer mechanical worm thing. So Static's trying to get her attention, being like, hey, you don't have to do this. And she's like, no, I have to. They were so mean to me or whatever. And she's like, all right, I gotta take care of this thing before it gets too bad. And then in the strangest reference, they reference Captain Atom number 1, where there's a volcano in the middle of Manhattan. So that's a thing. And so it doesn't even play into the story. They just are heading towards the volcano. I think maybe she's planning on dunking everyone into the lava. But Static gets in there and it's just like, hey, look, here's the thing. Yes, it sucks right now. But it does get better. Everything's going to fade away. All this bullying, all these people that hurt you, they're going to fade away. And apparently the people who bullied her are even on this train. So, yeah, she's just like, all right, fine. I'll I'll stop. And so Static disconnects her from the train. It crashes to the ground. And Static's like, hey, get her some help if you can. Like, just go ahead and get her some help. And then he immediately turns to the bullies and threatens them, saying, like, hey, I just sterilized you. I doused your privates in microwaves, so you're never going to breed again. And he was bluffing. Like, he didn't do it, but apparently that's just a thing maybe he could do. So then he says, like, all right, I'm late for school. He goes into school, and he has to go talk to the school psychologist. And the next entire rest of the issue, really, is just him going through his history, how he grew up in Dakota, and it wasn't the best place, but he loved it anyway. He had a friend, Frida, and then talking about the night he got his powers and whatnot, and then all the stuff that happened since then. And this is the only... We're 8 issues, final page, pretty much, of this book. And this is the only time that we go into what actually is and is not canon. Which is to say, who knows? So, he had all this Dakota stuff happen. And then he came over into the DC universe. Like, he got involved with the Teen Titans. But it says that he lost his memories for months. Like, all of that time is apparently just gone. And then it picks up with the cloning of the Sharons, which I have always been confused about, and this only barely explains slightly what happened. So, yeah, regardless, he texts his friend saying, hey, help me get out of this. So, he goes over saying, like, oh, yes, and here's all the stuff that I've done since then. And it just goes over everything that's happened in this book since then, including literally last issue's stuff. But regardless, the whole reason he has to talk to the school psychologist is that either because of how often he is late and how, you know, he's just skipping school and he's like not making friends or whatnot, he's either part of a gang or he's suffering abuse at home. And she doesn't think he's part of a gang because his grades are so great. So she wants to check him for any abuse at home. And during the fight against the train, he had bruised his arm. So he's like, oh no, she'll see my bruise and think that I'm being hurt. But like he apparently has a healing factor that's pretty good. So he focuses it really hard, rolls up his sleeve, and it's just like, there, see, nothing. And she's like, what? I thought for sure there must be some explanation. But at that point, the fire alarm goes off. His friend that he texted is getting him out of class, which his name is literally listed as Quentin. Do I know him? Have we met him? I don't think we've ever met Quentin, but apparently they're good friends. So him, Quentin, and then some girl that I genuinely don't think has been named yet, all run out of the school saying like, all right, guys, what should we do next? Hey! And that's the end of Static. So this feels like it was just the continuation of the last book, which I, of course, don't know. But, I don't know. Do I think it succeeded? Meh. Because, again, as jumping onto this, it's a new issue 1, I don't know, like, the stuff that happened. And they gave me bare bones. By the time we hit issue, 6? And everything started wrapping up, I was so confused as to, like, anything that was happening. And then these last 2 issues were just nothing. They were just filler issues. So this particular issue, I give like, I don't know. I give it like a 6. Just a flat 6. It's just a recap issue. There's not a lot there. I do like the beginning bit. I think it did that pretty well, but I also think that we've kind of already seen that. I feel like troubled teens is just the theme of this book. So yeah, it's fine overall, but it definitely would benefit if you knew the Static lore going into issue 1. This is not a jumping on point in terms of a series at all. And I don't think it would make much more sense even if you had just a passing knowledge. I think you would have actually had to read it in order to get the gist of it. Because after I read this issue, I tried reading, like looking up and Googling what actually happened, and there's nothing. There is like nothing on the clone Sharons. I can't find it, so that'll just die. I'll die and go to my grave with that mystery on my brain. But yeah, Static was okay the whole way through. Nothing great, nothing special, but it was there. Animal Man number 8, written by Jeff Lemire, art by Travel Foreman and Steve Pugh. We left off last issue with the family being surrounded in their trailer with rot-infested woodland critters. And this issue basically picks up with Animal Man going, okay, how are we going to do this? And Maxine steps up and basically says, I can do it. Let me just get in there. I can handle this. And immediately everyone is like, no, that's a stupid idea. Except for Buddy, who's like, I mean, she's really powerful. Maybe she could do it. And Socks the cat is like, seriously? But like, don't. Your job is to protect her. You need to be the one that goes out there and does that. But before they can decide anything, Maxine wriggles away from her mom, jumps out the door, and says that she can talk to the animals. And she does give them pause for a second, but then they immediately turn and start mauling Maxine to death. And her parents, rightfully, are freaking out. Buddy jumps in and just starts tearing the animals apart limb from limb. And when they're all finally pretty much decapitated, he takes Maxine's body, and it's messed up. She's definitely not there anymore. However, there's a voice coming from the woods, and out steps this horrifying, like, half fox, half human creature with Maxine's voice saying, hey, Daddy, don't cry. I'm not in that body anymore. And then the body continues to morph to just look like normal Maxine again. And she explains how as soon as they jumped at her, she just left her body, went into the red, floated around for a few seconds, and then took the body of a nearby fox who was unaffected by the rot, and then just turned it into herself. Meanwhile, her grandmother is draping a blanket over her old body and is just like, this isn't right. This is just wrong. So Maxine's happy about it, and she's like, oh yeah, no, it was fun, and it felt kind of good. And then she looks over at her old body, and she's like, oh, well, we don't need this anymore. I need to return it to the red. And she just has it wither into dust. And while her grandma is, again, freaking the hell out, Sock steps up and is like, oh, wow, nobody has ever learned to evolve that quickly. Like, you are miles ahead of any other protector of the red. So then Cliff gets a message on his phone and saying how a local town is being overrun by the rot, and they need to figure out what they're going to do about that. Are they running away from it? Are they going to deal with it? What's going on? And Buddy comes to the conclusion that they're all going to be coming after Maxine. She is the end goal here. So what they need to do is get away from there as fast as possible. But Buddy's going to stay behind, and he's going to stop them for as long as he can. And it's basically a suicide mission. And Ellen is very upset about this because, she doesn't want this. She doesn't want this life, but there's no choice anymore. The grandmother steps up and basically tells him how much of a dick he is for pulling all of them into it. And he's like, yeah, you're right. And I'm sorry. That all of you have been in this, but I'm going to make it right now. And he says goodbye to his family. And Maxine says to be careful. He's like, be careful. Psh, I'm a superhero, baby. And he flies away. Everyone's afraid. And he wonders whether or not things will ever get back to normal with him and his family. But regardless, right now he has to focus on the fight. He arrives, the military's all there. They're cordoning off the town. And just death and destruction are rampant throughout. He lands down. He tells the troops to retreat. And he's like, everyone get back. I got this. And as soon as he lands, the rot starts talking. It's the hunters talking through him. And he's like, oh, hey, it's you. The girl will be ours, blah, blah, blah. And it's just taunting him through the voices of all these critters. And eventually he just gets sick of it and kicks one of their heads off, which triggers the rest of them to start coming after him and mauling him. He channels the flight of a sparrow to get up above the crowd. And he's like, all right, if I just stay up here, none of them can get me. I should be safe. And then, as if on cue, a whole bunch of rot-infected birds start swarming after him. They knock him out of the sky. And he falls back into the crowd of animals who, again, just start mauling him. And after a little bit of gnashing and gnawing, they all start to dissipate, leaving Buddy's body there. And we see his eyes opened up, totally blackened, and now he has the voice of a hunter. So the body of Animal Man has been now possessed by the rot. That's where we're leaving it. I like this. I think it's a good continuation. I I'm curious where the focus is going to lie. Are we going to keep on splitting back between what Buddy's doing and what Maxine's group is doing? If so, I mean, I trust this book. I trust this book implicitly to handle whatever it is it wants to do with its story. It's telling it masterfully. I like. I kind of wish that they would have gone a little bit more grotesque in showing what actually happened with Maxine. Not the mauling part, but the body transformation part, because you only get one panel of it really, and it's like kind of dark and from behind. I really would have liked to see, just because it's done great things with those sort of grotesque changes of body horror. I really would have loved to see their take on that, but instead it was from behind and dark in one panel. Okay. But no, writing's great. Art is fantastic. Really does a good job at selling all this. This one is more basic in terms of like panel layout, but it also doesn't have that much influence with like the red. So I don't think it was really necessary. The times that they are interacting with the red, the panels do get a bit crazier. So yeah, no, it's a pretty just basic issue just to show off a few more powers and then set up where Buddy's going to be headed next. So yeah, I am interested to see how it continues on with the Rot Saga. Swamp Thing, number 8, written by Scott Snyder, art by Yannick Paquette and Marco Rudy. This is a real quick one because it is just not a lot of major content in here. So we pick up after Alec's transformation last issue, finally into Swamp Thing. We pick up just seeing the devastation that's going on in the American Southwest, where just you've got entire fields of crops being decayed. You have a couple hunters who are about to shoot like a deer or an elk or something, and it turns its head and it's just rot infested. You have swarms of flies that are just biting and nipping at everyone, and then you have literal zombified humans who are heads are turned backwards and sometimes disconnect from the body entirely. So, not a good time overall, and it's spreading wildly. And then we get to the heart of the rot. It is the place where Seth, whatever I call them, I'm going to say Seth from now on, is setting up their base of operations. It's made of the bones and the decaying organs of just all this stuff. It's an entire kingdom being built, and Seth sits upon a throne in the middle of it, when over the desert, throughout the page, flies Swamp Thing, because yes, he can fly now. And as he moves through, he's describing how his new body feels. He still feels his own body underneath it, but he can feel how it connects to the Swamp Thing body, how like every time he breathes out, he can feel the carbon dioxide being reabsorbed back into the plant body. So yeah, it's got abilities. So he's spreading green throughout the entire desert as he moves through, and Seth sees this and says, like, all right, everyone, get ready. We're going to attack the Swamp Thing as he arrives. And Swamp Thing just, like, hovers over them and just like, Seth, back down now, or we will fight. And Seth is like, no, I've been a representative of the rot for eons. You've been it for, like, literally a minute and a half. No, we're just going to kill you. And he's like, all right, so be it. And so a long-ass fight scene continues through, where we see that Swamp Thing is more than capable to dispatch the agents of the rot here, but his primary purpose of punching through all this is he's going after Abby, because Abby was put in that weird cocoon thing, and he is here to free her. So he's pushing his way through, and as he finally gets up to the point where they're at the cocoon, he's like, if you release her quickly, I'll destroy you equally as quick. But then the cocoon opens, and inside is no longer Abby, but this weird, the best I can describe is like half xenomorph, half leech is the best way I could say it, and it's just horrifying looking. And Alec realizes, oh, that is Abby. That's not good. And he tries to get through to her, and Seth is just mocking him the whole time. And he says, Abby, it's me, it's Alec. And Abby says, Alec needs to die, as she skewers him with her now super long, sharp tendril claw things. And that's it. That's the whole issue. It's a it's a brief one. I feel like it's just to show off the new Swamp Thing. I think he does have a full page spread here of just him, like in an angelic sun behind him sort of pose. I feel like this is just to get used to that. So no, it's good. It's solid. It's a decent follow up. It definitely isn't like blowing my hair back in terms of like, wow, these incredible changes. It's like, no, okay, so Alec is now Swamp Thing, and Abby is now her own rot version of the thing. So it's fine. It's good. Art wise, I definitely like it. There are a couple times in here where it gets a little bit like hard to follow. It doesn't matter because it's all just a fight scene, but like the pacing of the fight, it's hard to tell like where one panel ends and the next one begins sometimes. And again, if it was any sort of thing where the sequential order really mattered, I'd be more upset about it. But there are a couple times here. I will say there are, if I just follow the ROTS, or I guess Seats text boxes, they structure it in a very strange way, but it flows very naturally throughout the page. So yeah, I'm definitely enjoying the layouts on this book. But overall, I give this like a... I'll go ahead and give it a 7. I think it's good. I think it's possibly just like a weaker issue in terms of it being more, okay, let's just show off what Swamp Thing can do. And it's just him busting through a crowd. So it's not like him doing incredible things with the green. It's just him punching and stabbing and cutting a lot of things. So yeah, no, it's fine. It's just not blowing my hair back. And we'll see what the continued developments are with new scary lady Abby. Night Force number 2, written by Marv Wolfman, art by Tom Mandrake. Last issue, I don't know, man. A lot. If you can decipher last episode, go ahead. This issue picks up back in 1799. George Washington, getting back from his presidential terms, and he's finally coming home to relax. He goes out onto his land one night, and he comes across a clearing that he does not recognize. And when he gets there, there's a bunch of creepy, mysticky looking dudes and a whole bunch of decaying corpses. And the mystic dudes attack George Washington and then wipe his memory or whatever. And he makes his way back home and then proceeds to die the next day. And then we get the weird mystic dudes talking, and they say how they would hope that one of the presidents would be able to start generation 1 of something. And they thought that George Washington had the perfect DNA, but unfortunately he was infertile or something, and none of the other presidents have worked out. So they're still looking for something to start generation 1. So then we cut to present day. Zoe and James are leaving the motel, heading back to Baron Winter's place because they're like, all right, we need to talk. And before they can even start doing anything, Winters gets a phone call. It's the doctor who investigated like Zoe, who did tests on her, and apparently she calls Zoe and says, hey, you were pregnant. You have some weird scratch marks inside your womb. And then she picks up her shirt and sees that there's like a C-section scar. So she doesn't remember being pregnant at all, but she wants more tests done just to be able to like prove what's going on. So they're going to do that tomorrow. James tries to console her for a second, but then goes after Baron Winters, being like, all right, you need to tell us what's going on and how we managed to get from a hospital in South Carolina to Washington, D.C. And Baron's like, okay, totally, we'll do that. But first, Zoe, come with me. And he takes Zoe. James tries to follow, but the leopard holds him back. And they go through a door and get to London, England in 1648. And they make their way into this castle that has a dungeon underneath, and they go down to talk to a witch named Cassandra Fay. And I guess they just she has some level of information and they know each other somewhat. But apparently she's part of Generation 9. So they did start the generation thing, and her baby was Generation 10. And how apparently the darkness has been hunting for their family for 8 generations, and blah, blah, blah. Regardless, she gives up a bit of information in discovering who Zoe is. And then I guess Baron Winters says like, yes, I'll totally release you if you give up information. But then he just leaves and says how it's her fate to be trapped down there forever. So they go back home, and then we cut over to a party involving the senator from the first issue, I think, and some weird guys in suits who all look identical and bald and whatever. They say, all right, he's the senator's doing fine, but he has some weird resistance in his brain, and apparently he's part of Generation 9 as well, and he just needs to... They just need to maintain control until the election happens. So I guess they are trying to still insert themselves into the government. So Baron Winters and Zoe get back. James has a gun trained on Baron, but of course it doesn't work because Baron's just magic. Baron keeps on doing this thing also where like he keeps on saying stuff right before it happens where it's like, oh, and you should answer your phone. And then it starts ringing and I'm like, yeah, once was cute and all, but this is like the 7th time you've done that. Maybe just stop. So anyway, James picks up the phone, and it's somebody who he asked about DNA tests for, and then they start going over the whole story of James' father was trying to investigate a disappearance of a Carol Dutton back in the 50s. He got some information that led him to a photographer, I think, who wanted to be a singer. But regardless, they threw the book at the guy just because they wanted an easy thing. But the guy always said that he was innocent, and they never had any real evidence to convict him. But they did a trial and got him convicted anyway because they just made a good case. So years later, the father is doing some research on papers, and a baby was found in Colorado that had a birthmark that was absolutely identical to Carol Dutton's. It was a crescent moon on the back of the neck. And so he became obsessed with the case of like, was the person who was abducted like alive? And then there was a bunch of other abductions that were around the same ages, and they all were women and whatever. And so he went back and found 200 years worth of kidnapping. So then one day, James, as a kid, he wants to play baseball. He's knocking on his dad's door. And after knocking for a few seconds, he hears his dad scream from inside. So the walls start oozing green slime. And he busts in through the door and sees his dad being attacked by shadows, the same shadows that attacked them last night. So he can't do anything to save his dad. His dad's just being torn to bits, and so is he a little bit, but his dad gets the brunt of it. And finally, the shadows leave. His dad is dying, and he hands James a small coin, an ancient coin, and then dies in his arms. And basically, the conclusion of all this is that baby that showed up in Colorado is actually Zoe's mom. But Zoe didn't know that because she was put up for adoption. Like, she was left pretty much. And the grandmother, Carol Dutton, was the one that he was investigating. So, yeah, and Zoe has the same birthmark on her neck as well. So he's like, oh my God, that's insane. What are the odds that this level of coincidence, like we would all just coincide? And he's like, I don't think it was a coincidence. And Baron Winters is like, you're right, it wasn't. You're doing good. I still can't give you all the information yet, but I promise very soon. And he pushes James and Zoe out the door, and they end up in some graveyard somewhere else. And that's it. That's where the issue ends. I at least understood this one. That's like I've said, there's always been a thing with these mystical books, these magic ones, where they just throw a bunch of stuff at you in issue 1 and then just slowly decode it over time. I at least got where this one was going. It explained it out, and I got it. So automatically points for that. Art-wise, it's fine. It doesn't quite have as much weirdness as issue 1 did, so it's not quite as amazingly like, oh wow, look at that. It's fine. It's more or less just house style, it feels like, with a bit of a darker tone to it. Writing-wise, again, it's explaining. It's doing its thing. I don't like how Baron Winters is basically just doing that thing of like, oh ho, maybe you should answer your phone. Yeah, no, we get that. You've done it 4 times now. Thank you. So overall, I'm going to give this one like I'll give it a 6. It still hasn't got me yet. The generation thing seems interesting, but it isn't well enough defined to see whether or not I like it. But I think it could be something that they could do a lot with. But I am at least, of course, going to check out the next issue when it comes. And that's it. That's all the comics that came out from DC Comics this April 4th, 2012. And let us remember the 4 Fallen comics canceled after only 8 issues, lest we forget. However, we do have 4 replacement comics, so let's see what they are. They are Earth 2, World's Finest, GI Combat, and Dial H. Those will be coming next month, first week of the month. However, let me tell you what's coming out next week specifically. Next week, we have the number 8 issues of Batman and Robin, Batgirl, Batwoman, Superboy, Green Lantern, Mr. Terrific, Deathstroke, Grifter, Suicide Squad, Legion Lost, Demon Knights, Frankenstein, and Resurrection Man. Additionally, we have the number 7 issue of The Shade. I always forget about The Shade. I don't know why. That one just, I'm always, every time I hit the second week, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's a book. Probably because it doesn't really tie into anything else, and it's all original stuff. Anyway, I'm rambling. Let me go ahead and wrap up the show so you don't have to listen to that anymore. Hey, we have a Twitter, and we have a Patreon, both of which are in the description or the show notes, depending on how you're listening or watching this. If you like me, you can use those things to show your affection. If you hate me, I've never seen those things before in my life. I'm holding them for a friend. You have no evidence. It's all circumstantial. All right, that's me. Thank you very much for tuning in and listening. And as always, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.